So here I am with the next part of cardiovascular system. Now here we have got a picture in page number 78. Okay, so this is the picture of internal view of human heart. Earlier in our previous page, we have gone through the external view. This is the internal view. Okay, now in this internal view we have almost the similar things, just little bit difference. Like this one, we all know that the biggest artery is the aorta. Okay, then just below this one is also a big one. Okay, but which carries the deoxygenated blood is the pulmonary artery, because it is in the left side, so this is the left pulmonary artery. Next, here we can see this one is the vena cava, so this one is at the topmost, at the upper side, so this one is the superior vena cava. This is extending towards the lower side, so as because this is in the downside, this is the inferior vena cava. Next we are moving on to this portion. Okay, so we got this one to be the left pulmonary artery. This is extending towards the side, which becomes the right pulmonary artery. Okay, now next one is that there is presence of valves. See here, there is presence of valve, the gates. Okay, the valves. Now this valve is known as the pulmonary semilunar valve, because this valve is extending towards the pulmonary artery. So here this one is the pulmonary semilunar valve. Next we are moving on to this portion. We all know this is the right side. This is the right side. So here the topmost region is the right atrium. Okay, next here the small extensions are there. These all are smaller in size, so we can understand these all are veins. Okay, and what kind of veins? These are pulmonary veins. Okay, like this side we have got on the other side also pulmonary veins. Okay, now this side is the right atrium, so this side will be the left atrium. Okay, we can state it as auricle also, but in this book in ICSE we have got here, see, you can write it as auricle also, no problem, no matter in that, but here it is written as atrium, so you can write atrium also. Next, over here we can see that there is presence of another valve, okay, which is known as the tricuspid valve. This valve is present between the right atrium and the right ventricle. So this portion is the ventricle, the bigger portion. From here till here is the right ventricle. So here, so there is a barrier. Okay, so that, now what is the purpose of valves? We all know that the valves do not allow backflow of the blood. Okay, so here there is presence of the tricuspid valve, which is also known as the right atrioventricular valve. Why atrioventricular? Because it is present between the atrium and the ventricle. Okay, now next you can see this kind of, there is a kind of extension, a little thread-like structure. This all are, see here, thread-like structure. So this one is what? Chordae tendineae. Okay, so this is the chordae tendineae. Next, we are moving on here. So we have already known this is the right ventricle. Okay, now see here, we can see some muscles here. These all are the muscles. Okay, we all need muscle for every functioning of organs. Now this all are what muscles? This all are papillary muscle, and we have gone through the inferior vena cava. Next we are moving on to this side. Already we know this is the right left atrium, so here the down portion will be the left ventricle. Okay, so this is the left ventricle, this portion is the left ventricle. Now you see, here's a gap between this ventricle and between this ventricle. We can see a huge gap, this one. Okay, this shaded portion. See, I'm shading it. So this portion is the interventricular septum. Why it is known as interventricular septum? Because these two are ventricles. One is the right ventricle, the other one is the left ventricle, and between that is a septum. Okay, a septum means what? A barrier which is differentiating this both ventricles. So this septum, this one is known as the inter. Why? Because it is present between two ventricles. Okay, interventricular septum. Got it? Next we are moving on here, this portion. Okay, here we can see that there is presence of another valve here. This one is another valve. Okay, Now which valve is this, or what kind of valve is this? Now this one will be aortic semilunar valve. Now see, there are two semilunar valve. Here is the pulmonary semilunar valve, and here we can find the aortic semilunar valve. Why it is known as aortic? Because it is extending towards this valve is extensions from the aorta. So if there is extension from the pulmonary artery, then it is the pulmonary semilunar valve, and when there is extension from the aorta, it is the aortic semilunar valve. Again, we can see that between this atrium and this ventricle, there is again presence of another valve which does not allow the backflow of blood. So this one will be what? The left atrioventricular valve. Now this one is also known as bicuspid valve or the mitral valve. Now see, the right side valve which is present between the atrium and the ventricle is a tricuspid valve, and here we can find that there is presence of bicuspid or mitral valve. Okay, next here we can see this extension of this aorta over here. So as because this is at the lower side, this one will be the dorsal aorta. Okay, now see, we all should remember that aorta is the largest artery and vena cava is the largest vein. Okay, so both are having a diameter approximately 2.5 centimeter. This portion is very much important. Okay, so this comes in all the exams, that which is the largest artery. This is the aorta. Okay, very important. And if not the artery, which is the largest vein? So we can say the vena cava. Okay. Now what happens? See, always remember that in the right side, okay, in the right side there will be presence of tricuspid valve. That is what? That is RTR. Okay, in the left side there will be bicuspid or mitral valve. That is LBL. LBL means left atrium, bicuspid valve, and left ventricle. Okay, and here will be RTR, right atrium, tricuspid valve, and right ventricle. Okay, next we are moving on to next page. So here we are starting with the valves of heart. So already we know what is the work of these valves. The valves are important for the prevention of backflow of the blood. Okay, why there is need of prevention of the backflow of blood? Because if the blood again flows back into the place where it has come from, then there will be occurrence of mixture. Okay, the blood will get mixed, that is deoxygenated and oxygenated blood will get mixed up. Okay, now what is there next? We are moving on to the definition of valves. What are valves? They are the muscular flaps which prevent the blood which has once passed through it to flow back through it. So these are the flap. Okay, we can see here the picture of the valve. See, it's like a flap. When blood is flowing from this side, the arrow, you can see the downward side, then we can see that it opens up, but the blood cannot again rise up because here the gates, the valves gets closed. Okay, so that's why here it is written valve allows unidirectional flow of blood. The opening and closing of valves is due to the pressure difference across the valves. Two types of heart valves are distinguished: the atrioventricular valves and semilunar valves. So already in our previous picture, the internal structure of heart, we have gone through two types of valves. One was right atrioventricular valve, one was left atrioventricular valve. One is known as what? Tricuspid, and the other one is bicuspid or the mitral valve. And then we have found the semilunar valves. Where did we find that? In the pulmonary and the aorta. So we found the pulmonary semilunar valve and aortic semilunar valve. So two types of valves are present. Okay, here we are starting with atrioventricular valves. This valve separates what? The atria, that is the atrium, from the ventricles. Okay, from the ventricles, and allow blood flow blood to flow from the arteria to ventricles. Okay, now here we know, already I have stated that there is presence of tricuspid. Where is the presence of tricuspid? At the right side. So this is also known as right atrioventricular valve. Now this is having 3 cusps and is located on the right side of the heart. Why this is known as tricuspid? This is known as tricuspid because this is having 3 cusps in it. Okay, that's why 3 cusps means what? Like here we can see a picture. This is tricuspid valve. Okay, we can see there is presence of 1. This is the 1 portion. This is 1. This is 2. This is 3. So there is presence of 3 cusps in it. But as we move on to the, see, the bicuspid valve, see, only 1 and 2. Okay, 1, 2. These 2 valves are present. These 2 cusps are present. So this is known as bicuspid valve. Okay, so that means what? Why it is bicuspid? Because there is presence of 2 cusps. Why there is tricuspid? There is presence of 3 cusps. And where it is located? At the right side of the heart. This is located in the left side of the heart. Now next we are moving on. Tendon-like fibrous cords called chordae tendineae connect the pointed ends of the valves to the small conical projection called the papillary muscles located on the inner surface of the ventricles. We have gone through the papillary muscles also, which were kind of shaped like this, like the shells, okay, extending its rays. Okay, so what? Tendon like fibrous cords, which is known as chordae, because it is like cords, so it is known as chordae tendineae. And this is connected. This connects the pointed end of the valves. Okay, pointed end of the valves is connected where? To the small conical projection of the papillary muscles. Okay, this is not so important, but as if you can read it. Okay, okay. Now a question may come, what is chordae tendineae? So you can say that tendon like fibrous cords are known as chordae tendineae, which connects the pointed end of the valves to small conical projection, which is known as papillary muscles. Okay, and where is the location of the papillary muscle? On the inner surface of the ventricle. Okay, next we are moving on to the semilunar valves. Now where did we find it? In the pulmonary and in the aortic. Now this is having a 3 half-moon shape. It folds pockets. See, these are also like cusps. Okay, here you can see the pulmonary semilunar valve, and this one is the aortic semilunar valve. Okay, so in the pulmonary semilunar valve, we can find, see, there are presence of 3 similar type of here, like the tricuspid, but little bit difference is there. Okay, so this is what? This is like half moon shaped. You see, half moon shaped. Here exactly the sizes of these 3 cusps are same, but here in the tricuspid you won't find similar size in the cusps. This is different, this is different, this is smaller than this. So let's say there will be difference, but here it is like a half moon shaped structure. Okay, located in where? In the arteries leaving the heart. They prevent the blood from flowing back into the heart when the ventricles relax. So when the ventricle is relaxing, this valves, the semilunar valves, what they do is they prevent the blood from flowing back into the heart. Okay, now we are moving on with the pulmonary semilunar valve. Now what is pulmonary semilunar valve? The pulmonary semilunar valve lies in the opening where the pulmonary trunk leaves the right ventricle. Okay, and aortic is, this is located at the opening between the left ventricle and the aorta. Already we know this. Okay, now next we are coming on to the blood flow through the heart. Okay, now see, there's a very good kind of mnemonics which I have prepared for myself to remember this blood flow through the heart. Okay, but before that, let's read what is written over here. See, the right atrium receives the deoxygenated blood from the all parts of the body. The deoxygenated blood enters the right atrium through following 3 veins. Now see, first of all, the deoxygenated blood is entering your right atrium. Okay, now this right atrium receives the deoxygenated blood from all parts of the body, from the lower legs, from the brain. Okay, so how it is coming to the right atrium. Who is carrying it to the right atrium? The superior vena cava. Now the superior vena cava is at the topmost here. We can see the superior vena cava. Okay, here we can see, suppose this is the heart. We have already seen the picture. Okay, so suppose this is the superior vena cava. Now in this superior vena cava, what happens? It brings all the blood from the upper part of the body. Okay, then there is the lower portion here is the inferior vena cava. What it does, it brings all the blood from the lower part of your body to the heart. Okay, that is to the right atrium. So from the superior and the inferior vena cava, the blood from throughout the body is coming to the right atrium. What does this coronary sinus does? It drains the blood from the vessels supplying the walls of the heart. Now see, the walls of the heart also requires blood. Who circulates this blood? The coronary sinus. But this blood has to also get oxygenated and deoxygenated. So what this coronary sinus does? It brings all the blood from the vessels that is supplying the walls of the heart. Okay, blood to the right atrium. Now the right atrium is full of blood. Okay, when the right atrium gets full of blood, then what happens? Now see, now as soon as the right atrium will get filled up with the blood, it will contract. Okay, it will contract, and then there is presence of tricuspid valve between the atria and between the right atrium and the right ventricle. Now see, the purpose of the right atrium is to flow the blood from itself to the right ventricle, but there is presence of a valve which is tricuspid valve. So what happens? This tricuspid valves open when there is contraction in the right atrium. Okay, and opens. Why? Under the pressure. Who creates this pressure? The right atrium, because it is full of blood, creates a pressure on the tricuspid valves, and the tricuspid valves does what? Is allowing the whole blood to move into the ventricle, and the blood is delivered into the ventricle. So what is done? See, VRT. Okay, VRT, that is vena cava. From the vena cava, and you include the coronary sinus also. You may include or you may not, just you include that from the vena cava, it's reaching the right atrium, then through the tricuspid valve, it will reach the right ventricle. Okay, now what happens when the now see, again the right ventricle now is full of blood, and again the ventricle will contract. So the blood is then what the blood is done? When there is contraction in the ventricle too, the blood is pumped into the pulmonary trunk, since the tricuspid valves close. See, the tricuspid valves now closes. Okay, it does not allow again the ventricles to flow the blood into the atrium. So now what happens? Now the main purpose of the thing happens is that now the ventricle contracts and it will flow, it will pump, it will pressurize the blood to move through the pulmonary trunk. Okay, where? To the body. Okay, so what VRT are? I have made the mnemonics like VRT road पर पत्थर लेके blah blah बक रहा है. Okay, that is V for vena cava, right for right atrium, T for tricuspid valve, R for right ventricle, and P for pulmonary trunk. And then we are moving on to pulmonary vein, and then we are moving on to pulmonary artery, and then we are moving on to what? Wait a second. Sorry. See, again I'm repeating. I got a little bit confused. See, VRT road पर पत्थर लेके blah blah बक रहा है. Okay, I made it myself. You can make your own mnemonics. So V for vena cava, the superior and the inferior, right atrium, tricuspid valve, right ventricle, and P for pulmonary trunk, which again differentiates into pulmonary artery, and then through the pulmonary vein, it enters the patthar leke, so it enters the left atrium, and through the bicuspid valve it will enter the left ventricle, and then through the aorta it will move on. Okay, so here I have made for it, for my, you know, uh, easier way. I have made this mnemonic, so you can make of your own. So here I remember it like this. Okay, now what happens, see, the right ventricle is full of blood, so it will contract again whenever there is full of blood in any of the chamber. That will contract and create pressure. So it is creating pressure where? It is creating pressure, and then through where? It is moving to the pulmonary trunk, and since the tricuspid valve is closed, so it cannot go back. Now what happens? Okay, so next what happens? Now the pulmonary trunk divides into right and left pulmonary artery, each of which will carry the blood to the lungs for oxygenation. Now see, the blood is going to the where? Lungs. Okay, it will move on to the lungs from where? From the pulmonary artery, because there was presence of deoxygenated blood. Now this deoxygenated blood will remove the carbon dioxide from our body. So for the oxygenation, again the blood has to carry oxygenated blood. So for the oxygenation, it will move on to the lungs by what? Via what? The pulmonary artery. Now see, the pulmonary semilunar valve prevents the blood from returning to the right ventricle. Now see, in the pulmonary artery or pulmonary trunk, there is presence of what? There is presence of semilunar valve, pulmonary semilunar valve. Now what is this work? What is the work of this semilunar valve? It will not allow again the blood to return back to the ventricle. Now oxygenation occurs. What happens? The oxygenated blood returns to the heart via the pulmonary veins. Now what happens? The pulmonary veins will carry the oxygenated blood. See, as we know that the oxygenated blood will run through arteries and deoxygenated blood will run through veins. But here what happens? Here deoxygenation occurs, but there is presence of artery. Okay, but we knew that vein will carry the deoxygenated blood, but there is written pulmonary artery. That means what? See, arteries are larger in size, they are bigger in size, and they can withstand the pressure or pressure created by the pumping of the heart. So when the heart pumps the deoxygenated blood, if there is presence of vein, the veins may get ruptured. So there is presence of pulmonary artery. But for the oxygenation, lungs sends the blood to the heart. So here what happens? We don't require artery, because artery is required in those places where it needs to withstand higher pressure. Okay, so what happens? Then what happens? The oxygenated blood will return to the heart. Okay, via what? Pulmonary vein. So veins will carry, but which vein? The pulmonary vein. So when the left auricle contracts, now what happens? Again the auricle will contract, because from the pulmonary vein it will reach to the left auricle or left ventricle, and the blood, it will again contract when the blood gets full in the left ventricle, left atrium. Now the blood passes into the left ventricle. Now here there is presence of the bicuspid valve, which will not allow the backflow of the oxygenated blood from the ventricle to the left auricle. Okay, now what happens again when there is contraction of the left ventricle on the fulfillment of the blood is pumped into the aorta, the largest artery in the body, and the aorta will branch into vessels which will transport the blood throughout the body. Okay, except which place? Except the air sacs of the lung. That means the lung do not require oxygenated blood. Why is it so? Because the lungs alveoli directly gets the oxygen from the air itself, so it does not require any blood. So to each and every part of the body, oxygenated blood will reach, except the air sac of the lungs. That's it for today. I'll come with the next part again next time. Thank you.